Hey guys, it's been a couple days. Actually, it's been about 4 or 5 days since we finished up the last part of the electrical system. So much so that I can't even remember exactly where we left off. But it's done, and I'm pretty pumped about it. I did stop in the middle of it to do a couple other things. You'll go back and check a couple of my other videos. Once I got it to where it could run, I did my first fire up the engine and broke it in and everything. And then I had to go back and finish up headlights and tie everything up underneath the dash. So, oh man, wiring, what a pain. I learned a few lessons along the way, some tips and stuff, and really I just want to show you how it ended up looking here in the end. Hopefully you guys can learn something. Honestly though, the Speedway 12 circuit wiring harness, wish I had 2 more hands so I could give that thing 4 thumbs up. Alright, it's good. It works really well. Alright, let me check out what we've got done so far, how it all turned out, and then I'll give you my final thoughts on this system. Alright guys, here's how my dash turned out. Drilled my hole, put my key on this side, my lights on this side, light switch. I got my gauges all set up, and this was the easiest way to do this, was to wire it when I had it just sitting down here on my lap, and then hook up all my wiring on the back. Some other things I had to do for this system was the big one was to tie in this turn signal indicator. And this is just one of those, you just Google or go on eBay or Amazon and look up turn signal. A lot of guys use them on Jeeps, dune buggies, old Model A's, that kind of stuff like this. They're pretty cheap. I think this cost about 13 bucks, and it actually works really well. But there's some tricks that we got to get into on the old Model A here to adapt it to Speedway's 12 circuit wiring system. So the last time we looked at the car, I didn't have everything final mounted in. I didn't have my turn signals tied in. My headlights weren't mounted all the way up yet. Since then I've fired up the car, run it a little bit. I haven't driven it yet, but the electrical is done enough to do that. I also mounted on my tail lights, which are pretty straightforward, right? A guy could really overthink how to do this. I just welded the brackets straight to the bottom and screwed them on there. And I think they're almost straight. Lesson number 1. If you buy these aftermarket Model A type tail lights, they look really good for repros. 6 volt. They're set up, they could be set up for 6 volt. Mine definitely had 6 volt bulbs in them. And that cost me like a day, because the first thing I did when I tried to wire it up was blew half of the bulbs with my 12 volt system. And so then I sat there troubleshooting, trying to figure out why I couldn't get flashers to work and everything. And finally thought 6 volts. So I pulled the caps off, no kidding, 6 volt bulbs, they're half burned, no problem. I just went down to the parts store, got the same bulbs, 12 volt, bolt, screwed them right in. There's 2 bulbs, right? Both single element, driving light on the bottom, brake light on top. Put them in, and son of a gun, it works like a champ. The least amount of time you can spend in this position laying under the dash, the better. But let's get under here and let me show you guys what we came up with. Okay, here's the underneath of the car, underneath of the dash. So this is the fuse block that comes with the Speedway 12 circuit system right here. It doesn't have a very good mount, I'm not gonna lie. So here's what I did. I think I showed you this before. Welded this piece of square tube in. I ground all the paint off of it on one side, and so it's tacked in here and here, and that worked really well for me just honestly to use big zip ties and zip tie my fuse block right to that. Okay, I came in right underneath it. I mounted my coil. I wanted it clean on the firewall, so that's why my coil, to include a ballast resistor. Yes, a ballast resistor recommended with the Mallory Unilite in this configuration, right underneath the dash. Works great. The other thing I did was right here. I put a 1/4 inch bolt right through as a stud to put all my grounds on. So this ground goes to the engine. It's obviously, this is the body ground, and then everything else is grounded from the dash to right there. Okay, and my battery in the back of the car is grounded to the body as well. So my battery is to the frame to the engine to body. Man, I've got all kinds of grounds. Everything's connected. Okay, let's talk specifics here. This system is very well set up. An old Model A like this, where I'm not running many accessories, it's great. 12 circuits, more than enough. I'll show you the spool of wire of extra wires that I have. One of the things I did was I used the relay, one of the relays for the fan, electric fan. I used that for my fuel pump. And since it's a relay, it's tied right into the fuse block and it's labeled fan. I don't have an electric fan, so I ran it as my fuel pump instead. And it's just grounded, right? And it's hot when the switch is on. I realized doing a bunch of troubleshooting and messing with electrical, turning the switch on, I didn't like the fuel pump running. So I went into this ground and broke it, and I put a switch, just a little switch right here that sits under the dash. Normally that thing can be on. No big deal. Okay, let's talk about some other details of this kit. Okay, if you guys remember when I had this thing laid out on the driveway there, we had the fuse block here in the middle, and then we had our different looms going different directions. One to the back of the car, one to the front. What I did, and I kind of went against their recommendation, is I ran them kind of the different directions. Like I think the one to the rear of the car is supposed to go down the passenger side, inside the car and back, and then the engine front end loom is supposed to go out the driver's side of the car forward. Well, I did it opposite, and I'll show you why here in a second, but it looks real clean in the car. Okay, so here's my engine and front of the car loom right there, and right, the big wire where the that comes off the starter and goes into my fuse block, goes through there, my headlights and my, what I call my engine wiring, my starter wiring, okay? And then on the other side of the car, you see this piece of the loom coming down. That's everything going to the rear of the car. Tail lights, brake light switch, line lock, that kind of stuff. And then I had the other loom, which is basically this one, the under dash loom, and that kind of gets into this mess here. Okay, that's how I tied it up. Let me talk a little bit. I'll get out of here and I'll talk a little bit about some details and things I learned. Okay, so there's a few wires on this wiring kit that you gotta just, some of you guys will get it real easy, but I had to use my brain on a little bit. Good example was the choke wire. I thought, hey, great idea. I'll just use my electric choke wire in the wiring harness for my line lock because I'm not running electric choke. Boom, duh. I should have thought that's not a switched wire. That was dumb. No big deal, but I didn't, obviously I don't want my line lock on every time the key's on. So instead I just went in, snipped it, and put a switch. Another thing I did, like for example the brake light switch. It's designed to go under the dash, right? Most cars, especially GM, this kit's really kind of geared towards like GM. The brake light switch is right there on the brake pedal. Well, I didn't do that. If you guys look back a few episodes when I did my brake plumbing, mine is basically underneath the driver's seat, underneath the car, and it's the pressure switch in line. So I just had to, you know, when the thing was on the ground out there on the driveway, the wiring kit, I just had to pull that wire out and then run it to the wire set that goes towards the back of the car. Okay, so a few things like that, little lessons learned. Here's the big lesson I learned on this thing, and it had to do with adapting this guy right here. This turn signal switch. Okay, this thing actually works great. You can see it right there. Indicators work. The switches, the lights work on the car. What happens with this thing though is it does not adapt to the Speedway flasher hazard setup, okay? The way their setup is they have two wires, the hazard setup, which is with a constant hot, and the turn signals, which is a switched wire, and they just go through two prongs. And I guess it works great with the GM column kind of plug-in, but it doesn't adapt well to this kind of turn signal thing. So the lesson, the trick is, and I'll try to get back under here where you can see it, the trick is this right here, okay? This is a 3-prong switch. And if you just do a quick little Google search, I'm not the pro on this, this took me like 2 days to kind of sort out and research. This thing requires a 3-prong switch. Now, I was able to take those two different, the hazards and the turn signal flashers that came with the Speedway kit. I just took the constant hot and used it. I meant to make it switched. Yeah, got it. But I used the constant hot and plugged that in as a battery. You basically use 3 of those wires. One comes in, battery, hot to it, and then 2 of the other wires out of that 3-prong. One goes to the blue wire coming out of this, and one goes to the black wire. It's real easy on their package, the little package with the wiring diagram, or you just Google up wiring diagram for one of these. It shows it very clearly on there, except you don't really know where those wires come from in this harness. And that's where I had to get a little bit creative and just figure it out. So what I didn't use, part of those, the harness for the hazard and for the turn signal, I just went back and actually the switched power wire, the one for the turn signals, I just put it in my little coil of extra switched wires, and there we go. It's or it's switched. By switched I mean when the key's on, it's hot. For accessories and whatnot, I just put it in those coils, so now I can use it for some future accessory in the car. The other wire, the one that's constant hot, I came in and I used it as one of the 3 prongs on that flasher, that hazard. And in fact, this is what the Speedway kit comes with, the 2-prong flasher, and it even comes in this nice little plug. All you gotta do is pop the wires out that slip onto the hazard. So I use the other plug. It's a 3-prong plug. They only use 2 of the prongs though with this kit. So once I figured out the 3 wires required for to make my turn signal indicator or turn signal switch work, I just plugged them into this guy here, popped them in, and then my 3-way flasher just plugged right into that, and I hung it underneath the dash. And now it works like a champ. If you guys have any questions on how to use those things, you want to learn, or you're trying to do it and it's screwed up, shoot me a message, right? Put a comment down here, let me know. I'd love to help you out because it took me like 2 days to get through that pain. Okay, my horn button's hidden right here. If I hit it, the horn will go off. Yeah, there we go. That actually worked pretty well. It's hidden. We'll see once I get the steering wheel on. I should be able to reach it. What else? The tack, pretty straightforward. It's, you know, you got the lines off of a tack. You got power, lights, ground, and then the green wire off it, which just literally hooks up to the purple wire in the loom that says tack. And there you go. This, I think I paid $1 at a swap meet, and surprise, surprise, it works. It looks hideous, but it works. So, okay, I want to walk through a little bit more and show you how my wiring turned out here. Okay, we'll start with the front of the car, the headlights. I wish I could have made this look prettier, but I used some of this covering. This actually came on my tail lights. It's like the old school cloth loom covering to cover my wires. My ground for it, I just used a self-tapping screw there and tied my ground in because I didn't want to have to run a ground wire all the way back, and then ran my wires underneath. You can't really see except from right here. I don't like it, but it's good enough. Let's see what else. I screwed up. I bought single element turn signals, single element lights. So these are just turn signals. They're not driving lights or park lights. So the turn signal, yeah, there you go. You can see I just put a spade connector on my turn signal one because eventually I'll get dual element replacements for these. Hopefully something round, maybe a bullet style, looks a little more hot roddy. And then I can just plug it in, and there we go. Okay, so then my wiring comes across, ties into my other headlight, and then I go into this part of the loom, which I call my engine loom here. Let's talk about my alternator wire. One wire alternator. No problem if you have the old one. It has the exciter wire in the harness. And if you guys remember, I mentioned it before. It's labeled alternator excite. I just curled it up and it's tied off underneath the dash because inevitably one day this thing will quit and I'll need that wire. There's other ways around it. We'll get into that another time, but it's in there. And I don't like running just it's a nice heavy gauge wire, but I don't like tying it to my engine anywhere. So I used a piece of 5/16 brake line and bent this thing that fits in here and ran my wire through it. Just put a little shrink wrap on the end. There you go. Screwed up because I should have painted it black first. But it kind of protects that wire, and it comes right in and ties into my loom here, which is where I broke off with my engine starting stuff, okay? So obviously my big wire for my battery, my big wire right here, okay, that's that big red one you saw. That means it feeds the main fuse block. Speedway tells you you have to run this fusible link, and they include it in there. So that's why this looks like a little wire. It's actually a fusible link. It's the last kind of step of safety in this system. And then obviously my wire to power the starter, and then off of the other side of the starter for the full 12 volts when I crank over to the ballast resistor. That's what it's off that post for. Okay, and then I just punched it in a little hole through a grommet up through the dash, what we saw underneath there. A couple other wires I had to bring out through the dash. I hid right back here, and that's my coil wire, my oil pressure copper tubing, and then my 3-wire plug-in for the distributor. So that's pretty discreet. It hides back there because ideally, right, I want it to stand back here and not see a bunch of wiring on the engine. Okay? Oh, and if you haven't done so, go check out the video I did on how I spiffied up my spark plug wires. Excuse me. They came out pretty good. Okay, so that just brings it to the back of the car. I used this pigtail of wires that were lined up to go to the rear of the car. Here, I tied it in together with my dimmer switch, which I'll come back to on the dimmer switch in a second. But it ties into that pigtail and then runs back. Right here, I pulled off and dove through the side here where my brake switch and my line lock live. Okay, right there. And tied those all in. They both work well. And then my loom goes all the way through, punched it through the little bulkhead there with another grommet and into the back. And from there, that's where I have one that comes up for my fuel tank sender, and then my other ones are just tied in for my taillights and my fuel pump. My fuel pump line is in there as well. That's it. That's the overview of the electrical system. And just like anything else, I'd love to answer your questions. If you guys are considering using the Speedway wiring harness, highly recommend it. I want to know, you'll want to know how many electrical components you're running before you buy it. But if you need some tips or feedback or honest thoughts, email me, hit me up on my social media, or put a comment down there below and look in my comments of the description. That's where you'll find my how you contact me. So yeah, okay, let's wrap this up. All right, so in closing here on this Speedway 12 circuit wiring harness review and installation, I haven't picked up on it. I love it. I think it's great. It's worth the money. However, if I had to do it again, I'd buy the 20 circuit, and here's why. Because if you go open the catalog right now and look, you'll probably see about 150 bucks for the 12 circuit, and then about 180, I think that's right in there, for the 20 circuit kit. However, the 20 circuit not only has 8 more circuits for you, but the last time I checked, it comes with a headlight switch and I believe a dimmer switch. So like I paid a couple bucks at a swap meet for that dimmer switch, but I had to spend like 20 bucks on a headlight switch, and that one doesn't even work right. I'm not happy with it, but it works. Hey, so you do a little bit of quick math on that, and by the time you buy the 12 circuit plus those other couple things, you're right in there at the price of the 20 circuit. So it's half the price of any other big name brand wiring harnesses you're going to find. You make the call for yourself, but I highly recommend it. Okay, that's it for this episode. I really appreciate your guys' feedback, comments, awesome stuff. It's great. If you haven't done so, hit subscribe. I appreciate it. And let's continue to build this community.